Hello everybody, we are live for this stream. Hopefully all of you are doing well. Today we've got a few things to discuss, but I think the first thing that I want to go through today in terms of news, and something I think that many fans are wondering, is why Carlos Sainz has become so underrated. But I think that's the wrong word. I think Carlos Sainz has become overlooked in F1 media, by F1 itself on social media, but also outlets like autosport.com, the race, just F1 media outlets don't seem to give Sainz the time of day that many fans think that he deserves. So I want to go through why I think over his career Sainz has become so, I would say, so overlooked, and why he's become kind of F1's middle child, where he's good, but he doesn't seem to get the praise that he deserves for his pace, especially in the past few years. So I think the first reason that Sainz has become this kind of overlooked or this perhaps overshadowed figure is because of his first year, 2015, as a rookie in F1, he was alongside none other than Max Verstappen. And on paper, they were very closely matched. In 2015, I think, in their qualifying head-to-head, Sainz and Max were neck and neck. I think, actually, Sainz beat Verstappen 11-10, but in terms of points and race pace, Verstappen was faster than Sainz. But the key thing here for Sainz was that Max was younger. Max was about 17 when he kind of joined into F1. And this meant that everything he did became magnified. And as a result, despite Carlos Sainz being good, Max was always seen as this kind of next generational or this generational talent, and was focused on more by the media, by fans, and also, I think, in F1 coverage. And the year after this, I think, is the main thing which kind of cemented Sainz as a number two driver. Sorry, not as number two, but as kind of an overlooked figure in F1. And that is quite simply Verstappen being promoted. Because once Verstappen went up into Red Bull, that put all the focus on Max, and while Sainz was good, nothing Sainz could do would ever be able to kind of, replicate what Verstappen did. Verstappen going to Red Bull, winning in his first race, he became F1's big thing, 18 years old, leading, or at the very least contending in F1 for podiums. So this puts Sainz in a very awkward place, because following this, for I would say 2 or 3 years, everything that he does is kind of overlooked. 2016, after Max leaves, he beats Kvyat. But again, because of Max, because of the focus on this young sensation, or this younger driver at Red Bull, Carlos's performances aren't really appreciated. And guys, don't forget, Kvyat in 2014 was a Rookie of the Year, I think, voted by drivers. In 2015, he outscored Ricciardo. Now, of course, Ricciardo was unlucky, and I'm not saying that Kvyat is faster than Ricciardo. But the point is, Sainz beating Kvyat is by no means a mean feat. 2016 and 17, Sainz beats Kvyat, but does this get any attention? Not really. And I think the year after this really, I think, in my view, put Sainz in a very awkward place with regards to public perception. And that is 2018 with Nico Hülkenberg at Renault. Now, Hülkenberg is a very good driver. 2017, he carried Renault. In 2018, he was again at the front of the midfield. And what happened to Sainz was that he joined Renault and Hülkenberg beat him. It was close-ish, but it was clear throughout the whole year that Hülkenberg was faster. But here's the key thing. Nowadays, with Ricciardo at McLaren, Seb at Aston Martin, Alonso at Alpine, every driver, I think, or fans are more aware of the fact that going to a new team takes some time to adapt and to adjust to. But at this time, with Vettel going to Ferrari and excelling from year one, Alonso with a terrible car but beating Button in his first year at McLaren, etc., people didn't really talk about adjusting to a new team or trying to adapt to a new environment. So as a result, when Hülkenberg beat Sainz, people just thought, okay, Sainz isn't bad, Hülkenberg is good, but they just didn't really rate Sainz that highly, maybe as highly as they should have. So I think 2018, in the first 3 years of his career, 2015, 16 to 18, while Sainz wasn't bad, he wasn't amazing. He was a good young driver who was overlooked, but for me and for most fans, I think, the issue is after this. 2019 until now, because I think his speed has become more apparent, but the media haven't really caught on, or at least given him the credit that he deserves. And as you can see in chat from Source Friends list, even when it comes to F1 races, as we saw in Russia just last weekend, you hardly see Sainz in the coverage. It's as though he's invisible, and even though that's maybe just coincidence, when you put them all together, you kind of think, okay, Carlos Sainz, he deserves better. But I think the key here is that 2019 at McLaren, when he joins McLaren, this is where I think fans start to question why he's overlooked. So his first year at McLaren, he gets a podium and he's best of the rest in P6. This makes him one of F1's best drivers. He's young, he's quick, leading McLaren as they kind of get back up the field. But despite this, it became a really big meme. He was invisible on social media, in F1 social media, but also in the TV broadcast. But you have to ask yourself, why is it that at this stage, Sainz, a young driver leading McLaren, gets no coverage? And the reason for this, I believe, is because of Norris. Now, Norris was very quick, as we all know, but I think at the time, because he was a rookie, Sainz beating Lando wasn't seen as very impressive, even though on paper Lando, was right behind Russell in Formula 2. Because of his inexperience, when Sainz beat Lando, and perhaps because of Sainz being beaten by Hulkenberg just a few years before, 2019 and 2020, people didn't really I would say, at least the media didn't seem to give Sainz the credit that he deserves for beating Lando. This year, I think that we're seeing how good Norris is, but before this, people didn't I think, rate him as, say, a top 5 driver. So when Sainz beat him, people thought, okay, he's okay, but he's beating a rookie. But for me, the big issue is this season, because this year Sainz is at Ferrari, F1's biggest, most successful team, where you have more pressure, more expectation, but also more focus than you would at most other teams. In fact, any other team. But despite this, again, he's anonymous in F1 broadcasts, and this may sound very petty and very silly, but if you just look here, as you can see, on the F1 social media, this is post-race. Not one of the first 12 kind of posts after the race were about Sainz, despite him going from P2 to P3, his amazing calls for strategy, and having a great race. So you have to wonder, why is it that Sainz is just not here at all? I mean, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 posts. Sainz is in none. And I think part of the reason for this is, again, his teammate Leclerc. When Sainz joined Ferrari, there was always a sense of he'd be a number 2. He'd be kind of reinforcements, a backup, for lack of a better term, a Barrichello to Leclerc. But with that said, this year, I think he's been amongst F1's most impressive drivers. At a new team, well, whilst I think Ricciardo, Vettel, Alonso, they took 5 rounds to warm up, Sainz really from Imola, from Bahrain, round 1 and 2, he was already pushing Leclerc on pace. And as we speak right now, Carlos Sainz is 6th in the standings, just behind Perez. I think 7.5 points behind Checo. Point being, Sainz is very fast and is at Ferrari, a young driver, beating Charles Leclerc, who, don't forget guys, just 2 years ago, beat Vettel. Now, I'm not trying to stand a Seb or any driver here, but I'm just trying to make the point that Sainz is doing a great job, but despite all of his best efforts, it's being overlooked. And hopefully over the next few years, etc., we see Sainz kind of getting his credit. And the thing is, I believe that amongst fans, people see how good he is. But when it comes to F1 media, whether it's motorsport.com or the race or whoever, or just F1 social media, as you can see here, he's kind of always just put aside, which is a bit of a shame. But hopefully, I think as fans, we can just kind of call it out and see, okay, will Sainz ever get that appreciation? And will we kind of progress with our kind of perception of Sainz in the media? Okay guys, so that may have been a bit weird. I'll read all of your chats in a minute. Just so you know, I'm doing this kind of weird format where, not format, but basically I have a schedule. So in stream, I'll have, say, topics. That was the Sainz topic. I'll just talk for that for like 5 minutes, and then I'll read chat. Then I'll go on to the next topic, read chat. So now I'm just going to kind of read your comments, and then I'll go on to our next topic, which is Aston Martin. So thank you so much for being here. I wasn't able to thank you because I was kind of doing that kind of main topic, but I'll read some of your chats now. Gianluca, hola colega, ¿qué tal vas? Silent Tap, I'm from the UK, I'm currently in London, I've lived here my whole life. But my mum is from Spain, and my dad's from Cameroon. And Sansa, that's a great point. People like Alonso, Vettel, etc., they were at new teams with very limited testing compared to most seasons. So for Sainz to have done what he's done so far is even more impressive, I think. And I think it's a very good point that you make there. A very good point that you make. And look, I think that British bias is a factor, but to me at least, I think it's more complex than that. Because even people like Leclerc and Max, they've always been far more, I would say, highly rated by the media. So I think it's partly because of that, as Suar says, and as Leb's got great team chat, by the way, as you guys say. But it's a bit more complex than that. A great team chat, Jaloui, and Leb's God, of course. Zeta, thank you so much. That honestly means a lot. Zeta, I appreciate that. Also, that's the thing. I think that's also a good point. He was faster than Lando, but he beat him by just a few, maybe 10 points or so per season. And in qualifying, it was close. So I understand that. And Sangsa, that's the thing. It took so long for F1 to kind of talk about Sainz, despite him finishing P3. So yeah, a bit of a shame. If it counts, we can talk about Jeddah later. Really, did he not? Sainz is a very simple name. It's a very simple name. An F1 Godfather with some very Shameless self-promotion there. Interesting. I mean, I already spoke about that in terms of the points. But right, guys. Our next topic is going to be Aston Martin, so I'll get it up here on the screen. Okay. Aston Martin are a team who I think before the year began, I know before the year began, was so hyped up. With Racing Point probably having the third best car last season, with Checo winning the race at Sakir, but importantly with Seb joining Aston Martin, the rebranding, all of the money in the team, there was hype for this season. I wasn't on the hype train, but most people were. But with that said, Aston Martin have had probably the most, I would say, underwhelming season so far because Merc and Red Bull at the top, Ferrari improving, McLaren continuing their progression, Alpine as well making good progress. Actually, no, that's true. Alpine have had a pretty average year, but they weren't expected to really jump forward, and they've been okay so far this season. They're still P5 as they were last year, so Alpine a decent season, AlphaTauri again around where they were last year in P6. But Aston Martin have plummeted drastically from last year, and the question is, why is that? Well, Aston just struggled so much this year, and I think the main reason for that is rake. As you all know, for this season, the rake changed between between years. It was, I think, basically Aston Martin paid the price for copying Mercedes. This year, their philosophy of kind of lower rake was compromised massively because of the new regulations. So ironically, by copying Mercedes, they've inherited that kind of innate issue in the car, which is that their rake didn't kind of work with for this year's regs, and so they're struggling, and they're struggling massively. But with all that said, I think we have to dive deep and say, Aston Martin, where are we, mate? Where's their focus? Because realistically, as a team, they've had a very poor year, and they've had so much hype surrounding them. So I think the question is, next year, what are their goals, and can they deliver next year? Because I think, even though it's a meme, next year is going to be our year, next year has to be Aston Martin's year. Because if they're not up there fighting, then you have to question what are they going to do, and where do they go? Because they're a team with big investors, i.e. Lawrence Stroll, and if they're under fighting, then you have to question, okay, what are they here for? What's the kind of big aim? And Zeta, I agree. I think that, look, on paper, Lance isn't the worst driver in F1. He's, I think, I would say a C tier, just a decent average F1 driver. But when it comes to F1's midfield this year, he's a bit on and off, as you say. His qualifying isn't good enough. And his race pace can be good, but his racecraft, as we've seen with Seb, is a bit dodgy. Just look at Italy this year. If Shoulder doesn't squeeze out Seb and give Seb room, Seb stays behind Lance. And because Alonso, the Alpines, were very closely matched to Aston Martin at Monza, Seb probably finishes P9, Seb probably finishes P8, Alonso P9. That's a 6-point swing in favour of Aston Martin that they would have had, but because of Stroll's error, went away. Even again in Sochi, Vettel trying to overtake Lance, and even though it wasn't on purpose, that's relevant. In F1, most mistakes aren't on purpose, and Stroll again squeezing out Vettel. And there have been many occasions this year where Aston Martin have dropped points. Hungary, of course, even though it was unlucky ultimately, rules are rules. They underfueled their car, and they paid the price for that. Or at least they miscalculated their fuel in the car. They paid the price. So I think it's a really odd year for Aston Martin, because many of their fans especially were hopeful of a top 5 car at least, or at least a big year. But that's not happened. They're instead a pretty I'd say average outfit. I'd say if you look at this year, Bahrain, Imola, they're on par with Alpine. Portimao, Barcelona, Alpine are faster, but then Baku, Monaco, Aston are faster. So look, it's kind of up and down between who's faster, Alpine or Aston Martin. But the point is, Aston were far more hyped up than Alpine. Aston weren't supposed to be in the same realm as Alpine. They're supposed to be top 3. And as you'll see here, Otmar Zafnauer, that in principle said, they'd be fighting for podium. So I think it's safe to say that Aston Martin paid themselves by putting up so much hype for this season, and they've been unable to kind of match their own hype, which is a bit of a shame, but also I think quite interesting. I actually have missed, but just rewind and you can have a look, mate. But it's great to have you here, Ashley. Thick hands, I don't know. Here's the thing. I don't like predicting driver changes like 3 years in advance, just because it's a bit too difficult. Because things change way too quickly. But you never know. I think that Porsche will go to Alfa Romeo. And Piastri, it depends on if he gets into F1 next year or not. We'll see. But I think it's a bit hard to gauge. Jalu, and that's a good point. Guys in chat, let me know. Would you kick out Lance Stroll? I wouldn't yet. He's had an okay year. And frankly, he has been similar on pace to Seb. But when you look at F1 next year, Alonso Ocon, Alpine, Leclerc Sainz, Ricardo Norris, is Aston Martin's duo enough to maximise their car against those guys in the midfield? Is Stroll going to be enough to kind of lead that team in the future as a young driver? I don't know. And of course, in F1, as we've seen time and time again, the key is the car. If the car is good enough next year, then it probably won't matter too much if Stroll performs because the car will compensate. But with that said, if F1 is as kind of tight as it's supposed to be next year, and if it's as close as it's supposed to be with all the teams and drivers, you have to ask the question: will Lance be able to hold his own? And Leb Scott, yeah, that's the thing. The hype was real, and it came from Aston Martin themselves. Their PR team, when the year began, or say in February, March, because this comment was, I think, in February 16th this season. They were hyping themselves up so much to be a top team, top three, fighting for podiums. And that was, of course, to get sponsors and to kind of make the team, I would say, more attractive to their sponsors. But still, they were very much leading their own hype train, and it's kind of crashed and burned in a very embarrassing way. So yeah, it's a pretty big. It's not a shame because it's fair, It's their own fault. It's their own fault that they're at the back, or say struggling in the midfield. But intriguing to see how much they've fallen. Piastri in F1 or at Aston Martin? I don't think so. I think Piastri's future is with maybe Williams or Alfa Romeo, depending on what happens next year. But Aston Martin, I don't think so. I think that they'll keep Lance and Seb for at least 1 or 2 more years. And actually, that's a very good point. Aston Martin's strategy this year has been so poor. Last year, as Racing Point, I think it was Imola and I think Austria at least. Perez lost 2 podiums because of Aston Martin or Racing Point's strategy. And this year, consistently, Aston Martin makes some very bizarre calls on tyres, the timing of their stops. And of course, you have to give. I think that a big reason is that Alonso since Becker has been so good that he's been able to kind of outscore both Astons together. So it's not all. It's many things. It's not one issue. It's all of these things combined. But with that said, Aston Martin have been very underwhelming this year, and they've only got themselves to blame. But the question is next year what happens, because I think this is a kind of a broad theme in F1. But Aston Martin, McLaren, Ferrari, all these teams who aren't winning now, they want to and they're expected to be winning next year. So if Aston Martin, for example, don't win next year, then the question is what happens then? Because their sponsors are going to be thinking, we sign up for a top team, and if Aston aren't up to that standard, then they'll question if they're kind of spending their money wisely there. But also, I think just for the team's direction, it's quite funny actually. I think because when it comes to F1, it's often hard to gauge how good a team is going to be. But for next year, it's the first year of the new regs. And even though on paper the teams are supposed to be closer, if next season Aston Martin isn't a top 5 team or say a top 3 team, then you can expect that for the next 3-4 years after that, they won't catch up. Because if you go back to, for example, if you go back to 2014 in the hybrid era's first season, McLaren struggled with Mercedes engines, and even now, in that whole 7-year period, they've won 1 race, for example. So it's taken them 8 years to recover, and they haven't won since then. Ferrari, 2014, pretty poor car, and they haven't won since. So again, it's critical to start well next season because that's your foundation for the next 4 or 5 years in Formula One. So it'll be critical for Aston to improve. Artwald, I'm alright, mate. It's great seeing chat again. Arvin, maybe in a minute we'll get onto that. I think that we will. Sanskrit, yeah, I agree. I mean, look, as I said, they've made some good calls. It's not as though they've been terrible all year, but strategy has been a factor that I think has gone against them. Seb Smith is of course adapting, and I think Alonso's adapted better and has been better this year than both Aston drivers. Even Ocon at Alpine has been better than the Aston duo. Gasly as well. So I think maybe the 6th best car and also mistakes from the team at Hungary have cost them significantly. Alebs, to be fair, here's the thing. I think that Stroll has got okay race pace, but being completely honest, Alebs, he's not beaten a teammate since Sirotkin. Massa outscored him. Perez outscored him. Vettel's not outscoring him, and Vettel now is not at his best. He's older, and I think that Stroll is not necessarily one of the best. He's doing well, but he's still trying to find his form again, and he's still beating Lance. So I think that once Seb is kind of up to speed next year with those extra kind of days of testing, Seb's going to be beating Stroll more convincingly. So whilst Lance is okay, I'm just questioning, is he going to be enough moving forward? And also, just from a more ruthless perspective, F1 is a business about winning. And if you have your son in your team, and as the father, Lawrence Stroll, you're running the team, is your kind of judgment going to be fair and good enough to make your team as good as it can be? Maybe not. To be fair, look, this is my first, guys. First of all, thank you so much for being here. This is my first kind of scheduled live stream. As you can hear, I'm stammering a lot. I'm speaking a bit too fast, so I'll try and improve all those things. But I'll be doing streams every day at this time, so please hit the notification bell so that when I do go live, you're all here. But I'll be making improvements. So guys in chat, please just let me know areas to improve, suggestions, all your comments, and try to improve the stream so that they're better to watch. Otter, I'm not going to predict Aston to be a top 2 team, but I think that the teams will shuffle for sure. The question is in what order. I don't know, but there will be for sure a big, I would say, overlap and change between teams for next season. And Sangso, that's the thing. I think Lawrence is prone to mistakes, even though he's not a crashy driver as maybe some others are. He has his on and off weekends. His qualifying can often be hit or miss. And in a very tough F1 grid this year, we have Alonso, Ocon, Vettel, Leclerc, Norris, Ricciardo, etc., etc. That can cost the team points. And Ed, first of all, great to see you again, mate. But that's the thing. Sainz is currently outscoring one of F1's best drivers in Leclerc in his first year at a new team, and it's gone completely under the radar. Sainz, mate, thank you so much, mate. Thank you so much. That does mean a lot. And great to see you in chat. And I agree. I think that this year for Seb, like Alonso, like Sainz, like Ricciardo, it's an adaptation year. So I think that Seb will be better next year and will beat Stroll by more next season. Jasper, mate, okay, fair enough. That's true, actually. That's a good point. That's a good point. But yeah, I think that Seb will improve next year. But I think that's I think why Alonso and Sainz have been so good this year. Because next year, Alonso and Sainz will have more testing. And guys, don't forget, that Alpine is built around Ocon. That Ferrari is built around Ferrari. That McLaren, those cars are built around those drivers. So if Alonso and Sainz in particular to be so quick and to be so consistent at their new teams, it's very, very impressive. And I think, guys, okay, I'm an Alonso fan, so I'm in that way biased, but just hear me out here. Actually, I've got my Alonso slide here. I think Alonso proved his value to Alpine very much last weekend at Russia. Of course, since Baku, he's been amazing, faster than Ocon in qualifying and race. But if you go to Russia, guys, and I think I'll try and find the article for you, but Russia post-race, Ocon said, and I quote, "I lost time because my car setup wasn't the same as Alonso's." And to me, that speaks volumes, because Ocon all year has basically had the same car setup as Alonso, but for Russia, because of the kind of conditions on Friday, Ocon had a different setup to Alonso's. And because of that, in part, Ocon lost time. And that's why Alonso and Seb are so valuable for their teams next season, because Alonso knows how to set up a car, and ultimately, he can make the car faster. If Alpine, for example, take Ocon's ideas for setup next season, it will cost them time. It may sound rude or harsh, but that's the facts. At Sochi, Alonso's setup was so much better and he was so much faster that if you go to, if you rewatch the race, guys, in race trim, when Alonso was on lap 25-30 on those old hards, he was lapping faster than Ocon on fresh mediums, and Ocon was in clean air. I think that says all about how Alonso's fast as a driver, but also car setup. He can improve Alpine's direction and get them on the right track to build the best car. Because, guys, don't forget, Alpine or Renault, they've only won when Alonso's been there. They have two championships in the drivers. They were both with Alonso. He was there 2003 and 4, building that team forward to win. So when it comes to car setup, again, Alonso's proven his worth as a driver in terms of skill, pace, ability, but also in terms of car setup. And it's the same for Aston Martin. Aston Martin, with all due respect to Lance can't help Aston Martin, or at least can't be good enough to help set up that car for next season. He just lacks the information and the knowledge. Seb, though, has the experience and the speed to set up that car. So I think very much so it's a case of Seb and Alonso are critical for their teams next year and developing. F1 Godfather, I disagree. Ocon's been in F1 for a year before. So Ocon was Alpine next year. He's more used to the car. Alonso's older and he's been out of F1 for 2 years. So it's definitely a big adjustment for Alonso, without a doubt. Of course, it's not say an Ocon built car completely, but it's more Ocon-esque. The car that Alpine has doesn't really suit Alonso in general. And since Alonso got his custom power steering, I think it was at France or Baku, he's been faster than Ocon pretty much in qualifying and the race consistently. Jasper, yeah, Turkey will be an interesting race. If it rains again, that'll be very fun. But yeah, a very quick track. A classic, really, on the F1 calendar. A throwback, so I'm very excited to see that. Sans Club, I mean, I'll go into Perez at some point, but to me, the Perez issue is that at Baku and France, we saw his pace. At Baku and France, I was thinking, okay, race pace on par or close to max. But since then, he's been poor. And guys, with all due respect to Perez, he is closer to Russell on points than he is to Verstappen. He's in F1's best car, and in Zandvoort, he was out in Q1. Silverstone, he was P9 in qualifying, spun out in the sprint race. And even the people said that he's got a good race pace, realistically, his race pace isn't as fast as Max's or Hamilton's, and compared to Bottas, he's probably not as fast either. So, even though he's, I think, had his moments, Perez has underwhelmed me. But again, next year, more testing, new cars, that could help Perez massively. Just for my, I don't know yet, it's in 10 days, so the weather can change a lot, so honestly, I don't know massively. Diego, great to see you in chat, mate. Zeda, you're referring to, what you comment there? About Aston Martin? I mean, look, Thiago, I take your point, but it's not that simple. Having the facilities, etc., it's a far longer process than that. It's not just about the buildings and the experience. McLaren had all the buildings and the infrastructure in the world, and they were still poor for many years. It's about many things. And also staff, experience, philosophy, engine, so many factors. So whilst, of course, Aston Martin is for sure going to be a team that have the potential to be a top team, it's no guarantee. Because Alpine, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, they've all got the facilities. Realistically, every team in F1 could hypothetically win next year. So it's about which team can maximise their chances. Ed Mouse, mate, no issues. F1 good father, it's way too early, mate. Way too early to tell. I mean, Formula 3, Helga's done well, but in Formula 2, we'll see how good he really is. In Formula 3, Armstrong was a top 3 driver, but then in F2, he's been poor. So way too early to say if RB should go for Helga. Of course, we'll kind of look at Helga's performances and his progress, but he's not going to be someone that I'm going to predict is RB worthy yet. Thiago, okay, there you go, makes sense. Mercedes, who's talking about Mercedes in chat? But yeah, to be fair, I mean, Mercedes, I don't think that they'll win again next year, but I think, frankly, they could again be fastest. There is no reason that they wouldn't be. Because this year, I don't think they've sacrificed too much next year for this season. So, Theo, I agree. I think that Merc could be very much a top team. Very much a top team. Just for sure, I think that next year for Perez is make or break. If next year Perez can't adapt and be closer to Max, then I think it'll be a big concern. But Sanskar, here's the thing. Even though that RB is suited to Max, that isn't the only place where it's the case. In McLaren, the McLaren is suited to Norris. At AlphaTauri, the AlphaTauri is suited to Gasly. See that Perez is in a tough spot. He's the only one. So hopefully we can see him progress, because it's been a very, I would say, iffy year for him. But guys, I'm gonna end this from here. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of you massively. I'll be live again tomorrow, same time, so please tune in then. If you need to subscribe and hit the bell for when I go live so you're all notified. Thank you so much for watching.